Matsayang araw muli sa ating mga batang mandunong at welcome sa ating Project SOAR, series of online academic reviews of Mathematics CLAID Module for Week 9. Sa ating mga viewers, huwag po natin kalimutan i-share ang ating videos or mag-host ng watch party para sabay-sabay po tayong matuto. Kanina, napanood natin ang lecture para sa Business Mathematics. Ngayon naman ay ating mapapanood ang Week 9 for General Mathematics. Our next speaker is a Special Science Teacher 1 at City of Mandaluyong Science High School, where she is also an alumna. She is a graduate of Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Mathematics at Philippine Normal University, Batch 2017. She is currently taking her degree in Master of Science in Teaching Mathematics at De La Salle University, Manila. Let us all welcome Ms. Karen V. Rizal.
Thank you, Ma'am Bensan, for your generous introduction. A blessed day, everyone, especially to our Education Program Supervisor in Mathematics, Mr. Restituto Rodelas, to our school head, Mr. Roderick Menjola, to our Mathematics Head Teacher and Coordinator, Mr. Loreto Nervar, to our Senior High School Focal Person, Mrs. Stephanie Fababair, and to my students from City of Mandaluyong Science High School, Grade 11 Firma, Poly, Jobs, and Gates. A blessed afternoon to everyone. Again, I am Ma'am Karen Rizal from City of Mandaluyong Science High School, and I will be your teacher today in General Mathematics for Week 9 of our second quarter. Handa na ba kayo? Tara na't sabay-sabay na matuto sa matsayang araw na ito, mga batang mandunong. Of course, before we start, we should identify first our objectives for today. At the end of the session, you should be able to: number 1, define tautology, contradiction, fallacy, and rules of inference correctly. Second, identify the 4 standard types of categorical propositions. Third, determine the validity of categorical syllogism. And fourth, correctly apply the rules of validity in real-life arguments. Before we proceed, let us first have a recap. I want you to give a potential outcome based on each scenario. First, if it is vacation now, then, come to think of your answers. Second, if the mall is open now, then. Third, if it is Sunday tomorrow, then. Fourth, if it will rain, then. Mag-isip ng mga maaaring pwedeng kasagutan sa bawat bilang. Ayan, mukhang marami na kayong mga naisulat at nailista para sa mga scenario na ito. Siyempre, meron din akong hinanda para sa inyo. Para sa una, if it is vacation now, then incoming grade 12 students have time to prepare for college entrance examination. Pangalawa, if the mall is open now, then people spend money for their needs. Pangatlo, if it is Sunday tomorrow, then today is Saturday. Pang-apat, if it will rain, then internet connection might be affected. Alam ko marami rin kayong mga nasulat na sagot. Siyempre, wala namang maling sagot. Lahat naman yan ay tama. To understand logic, we must know what makes up a valid and correct mathematical argument. Moreover, in order for us to learn mathematics logic, we can apply the truth table technique to show that the argument form is valid or invalid. But first, let us identify some important terms that we can use as we further study logic. The first one, when do we say that an argument is valid? If it satisfies the validity of condition. That is, the conclusion Q is true whenever the premises are all true. Next, a previous statement or proposition from which another is inferred is called the premise. And the final proposition in an argument is called conclusion. And an argument is a series of statements or propositions used to establish a definite proposition. For example, you have premise 1 and then premise 2. You have there your conclusion based from the two premises that you have. For example, your premise 1, all birds can fly. Ang premise 2 mo naman, chickens can fly. Then, your conclusion, therefore, chickens are birds. Many propositions or statements in mathematics are true in all cases. Yung mga theorems, yung mga postulates, and geometry, they are good examples of these statements. Merong mga truth values na laging true in all cases. On the other hand, meron din namang mga propositions which are always false in all cases. And then also, there are statements which are true in some cases and false on other cases. So, let us identify first yung una, which is known as tautology. So, a tautology has a truth table that contains only true. It is an assertion that is true in any possible interpretation, meaning a tautology is a propositional form that is always true. Now, let us have our first example. We have here P implies Q or Q implies P. So, just like what we did sa ating mga truth tables, we identify first what are the possible values of our propositions P and Q. So, lagay muna natin ano-ano yung mga possible values. We can have here true. Both P and Q are true. It is also possible na ang P natin ay true and then ang Q natin ay false. And then, pwede naman na ang ating P ay false and then ang ating Q ay true. And then, it is also possible that both P and Q are false. Okay? And then, applying yung sa implication natin. We know that it will only be false if your premise is true and your conclusion is false. So, true, false, true, and true. Ngayon naman, the other way around. So, titignan natin. For this fourth column, ang ating magiging premise ay ang ating Q and then ang ating magiging consequent or ang ating conclusion ay itong P naman. So, tignan ulit natin. It will only be false if your premise is true and then your conclusion is false. That's why we have true, we have here true, we have here false, and then true. Now, applying yung disjunct natin. Okay? True or true, it will give us a true value. False or true, it will give us still a true value. True or false, still true. And then true or true, true. So, ibig sabihin, etong ating given na ito ay tautology. Because, as you can see, etong last column natin, we have values that contains only true values. Ngayon naman, let us move to the next, which is contradiction. So, ito naman, it has a truth table that contains only false, meaning it is a propositional form that is always false. Now, let us try to show na ang P and Q and not P ay isang contradiction. Let us first place in the possible truth values. Possible na both P and Q are true. P is true, Q is false. False ang P, Q is true, and then both are false. Now, let us conjunct that. Remember, dun sa ating week 8 na for the conjunct, it will only be true if both P and Q are true. So, tignan natin. For the first one, true and true. True. True and false, that will give us a false statement. False and true, that will give us a false statement. False and false, that's still false value. Now, for the fourth column, we are going to negate P. So, negating true, it will give us a false. Negating true again, false. And then negating false will have a true value. And then negating F, it will give us a true value. Now, let's proceed to this one. We are going to conjunct the third and fourth column para makita natin whether is this really a contradiction or not. So, true and false, that will give us false. Okay. Next, false and false. False. False and true. False. False and true. Still false. So, ibig sabihin, eto, tingnan nyo yung last column natin, lahat ng values ay false. Meaning, this is a contradiction. Ngayon naman, alamin natin yung ikatlo. A conditional proposition that is not tautological is called a fallacy, meaning that is neither tautological nor a contradiction. So let's try this first example. So lagay muna natin ulit ang mga possible values. Both are true. P is true and then Q is false. P is false, Q is true, and then both are false. Now, let us get disjunct of P or Q. So, sabi natin, it will only be false. If you still remember yung lecture natin sa week 8, it will only be false if both P and Q are false. So, lagay natin true, 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 and false. Now, let us negate this one. So, magiging false, 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 and true. Now, since it also requires for us to get the conjunct of P and Q, kunin naman natin. Remember na it will only be true if both your P and Q are true. So, ibig sabihin, true, and we have here false, we have here false, and then false. Okay? Now, we are going to apply yung sa implication naman. Anong sabi natin? For the implication, so in this case, etong fourth column natin, this will be our premise. And then, etong fifth column natin, this will be our conclusion. Or yung tinatawag nga na consequent. So, sabi natin, it will only be false if our premise is true and then if our conclusion is false. So, ibig sabihin, for rows 1, 2, and 3, that will give us a true value. But for the last row, since we have a premise which is true and then a conclusion which is false, this will give us a false value. So, ibig sabihin, this is an example of a fallacy. Now, let me introduce to you to another term which is important in the world of mathematical logic. That is the rule of inference. So, a conditional or biconditional proposition that is tautology is called the rule of inference. It is arguments that are used as building blocks to construct more complicated, valid arguments. Ibig sabihin, ang rule of inference, since it will come from tautologies, and we know that a tautology, this is a statement which is always true, it makes sense to use them in drawing conclusions. And alam naman natin na, like most proofs, ang mga logic proofs natin, they usually begin with premises. And these premises, ito yung mga statements that we are allowed to assume. Also, we have the conclusion. Ito naman yung mga statement that we need to prove. And then, the idea is for us to operate on the premises using the rules of inference until we'll be able to arrive with the conclusion. Okay? So, ngayon, try natin. Let's show na etong modus ponens is a rule of inference. Okay, so ilagay muna natin ang possible values ulit ng ating two propositions, P and Q. So, possible that both are true. Pwedeng true ang P, false ang Q. Pwedeng false ang P, true naman ang Q, and then both are false. Now, applying ulit, for the third column naman, this is the implication or yung conditional, it will only be false if our premise is true and our conclusion is false. So, lagay natin, we have here true, false, true, true. And then, we need to conjunct yung ating first column dun sa ating third. Tingnan natin. It will only be true if both P and Q are true. So, tignan, no? Etong una, true and true. So, that will give us a true statement. And then, we have here true and false. It will give us a false value. And then, false and true. So, false pa rin. And then, false and true. Still, it will give us a false value. Okay? Now, this will serve as our premise based from sa fifth column natin. Ito. Tama? And then, etong Q, this will be our conclusion. Yan. So, i-apply natin ang implication ulit. It will only be false if your premise is true and your conclusion is false. Tama? So, tignan natin ha. True implies true. So, ibig sabihin, true statement. False implies false. This is still a true statement. And then we have your false implies true. This will also give us a true value. Tama? And then false implies false, true value. Remember, wag pagbabaligtarin ang premise and then conclusion. Okay? So, kitang-kita naman natin na itong last natin, it yields to values which are true in nature. Yan. Okay? So, that is how we show yung sa rule of inference. Okay, so these are the other rules of inference that we can use, diba, for in our study of mathematical logic. So these are the rules of inferences that you will be encountering. So let's have the first one. Yun yung pinakita natin kanina. Ibig sabihin, these are our premises, and then this is our conclusion. Okay? So, ang tawag doon ay modus ponens. Okay? If you're going to use the truth table, you can validate this given rule of inferences. And then second, we have the modus tollens. Okay? We have the premises which are not Q. And then, next premise, P implies Q. Therefore, we have the not P. Okay? And then the third one, we have the hypothetical syllogism. So, we have here the premise P implies Q, Q implies R, therefore P implies R. So, para maipakita ulit, this is the tautology. So, you can try this, itong tautology, para ma-verify talaga whether this is a rule of inference. Ayun. So, just like what we did dun sa first part, sa modus ponens, same procedure. Yun nga lang, iba ang mga premises natin. For modus tollens, for hypothetical syllogism, and then for the fourth one, we have the disjunctive syllogism. So, as you can see for this, our premise are P or Q, and then not P, therefore Q. And then we still apply yung ating conjunct. And then this is known as disjunctive syllogism. Yan. Now, we still have 4 more rules of inference. For this one, this is addition, wherein P, therefore P or Q. Ibig sabihin, you'll have there the disjunct of Q for the conclusion. Okay? And then we have here the simplification, P and Q, therefore P. Next, we have for the conjunction naman, we have P, Q as the premises, therefore P and Q for the conjunction. Same process lang din if you want to verify for the tautologies. And then lastly, we have here P or Q, not P or R, therefore Q or R. And then this is the tautology, and then it is known as the resolution. Now, let's have this example. Determine whether the argument, if Juan enrolls this school year, then he must have gadgets for his online classes. Juan doesn't have gadgets for his online classes, therefore, he will not enroll this school year. Is valid, and determine whether its conclusion must be true because of the validity of the argument. So, let's take a look into this statement. Ayan. Okay, so let's have our solution. So, let P be our proposition who one enrolls this school year. Tama? And then, we also have, he must have gadgets for his online class. So, ibig sabihin, we have here our premise, which is P implies Q. So, etong una, that is for our P, and then, he must have gadgets, that is for our Q. And then, kadugtong, who one doesn't have gadgets for his online class. So, negation ng Q natin. Therefore, he will not enroll this school year. So, therefore, not P. Is this valid? Yes, the statement is valid because it follows yung ating modus tollens. Ayan. Okay? Now, let's proceed. An argument, premise 1 and premise 2 and ellipsis until the premise n implies Q, which is not valid, is called fallacy. Okay, so these are the following fallacies. So the first one, we have here, itong P implies Q and Q, therefore P. So this is a fallacy of converse. Next, we have here P implies Q and not P, therefore not Q. This is known as the fallacy of inverse. Next, we have the P or Q and P implies not Q. This is affirming the disjunct. So, ito naman, these are the fallacies that is not valid. Okay? Or it is not considered as a tautology. Okay, and then another, eto pa, we still have 3 more. We have the P implies Q, therefore Q implies P. This is known as the fallacy of the consequent. And then next, we have the, it is not the case that P and Q, and then not P, therefore Q, so denying a conjunct. If you're going to try also, in verifying this one, ito naman ang mga gamitin ninyo for the truth tables. And then, you will be able to see na, it will not give me true values. Okay? Dun sa pinaka-last column. And then, we have here, P implies Q. Therefore, not P implies not Q. So, this is known as improper transposition. Meron din tayong other forms of structural fallacies. So, we have the first one, arguing backwards with all. All A or B, X is B, X is A. Next, generalizing with almost all. Almost A or B, X is B, X is A. Next, reasoning in a chain with some A or B, some A or C, some B or C, and then arguing backwards with no, all A or B, no C is A, and then no C is B. Now, let us have this example. Is the following argument valid? If not, identify the fallacy. If Pedro is an activist, then he is accused of being a terrorist. Pedro is accused of being a terrorist, therefore, Pedro is an activist. So, dito, i-identify muna natin ano-ano yung mga propositions na gagamitin natin. So, una, P, Pedro is an activist. Q, Pedro is accused of being a terrorist. So, let us translate this into symbols. So, we have, if Pedro is an activist, so implication. Pedro is an activist. P implies Q. Okay? And then, Pedro is accused of being a terrorist. So, that is Q. Therefore, this is our conclusion. Pedro is an activist. You can use also the truth table, but if you still remember our discussion a while ago, yung sa fallacies natin, this is not considered as a valid statement because this is the fallacy of the converse. Okay, now let's proceed. So we have here another term which is a categorical proposition. So this refers to a proposition that combines two categories and asserts or denies that all or some of the elements of one category are part of the category. In other term, this is just simply statements about the relationship between categories. Okay, and it will state whether one category or categorical term is fully contained with one another, or if it is partially contained within another, or is it completely separate. Ayan. Okay? And we have here subject term, which is denoted by capital S. It refers to the main argument of the whole proposition. So in this case, all integers are rational numbers. Etong integers natin, this is our subject term. This is our S. And the predicate term naman, denoted by capital letter P, tells us something about the subject. So, in this case, rational numbers, this is our predicate term. Okay, so here are the standard form categorical propositions. Okay. We have here the universal affirmative. We have the particular affirmative, universal negative, and particular negative. This is presented that expresses quality, either affirmative or negative. So, if the proposition affirms some class of things or people, whether complete or partial, then ang quality nun ay affirmative. Okay? There are two propositions that are affirmative in quality. The universal affirmative, eto nga, A. And then, we also have the particular affirmative, which is for I. Okay, their letter names A and then I, respectively. It came from the Latin term affirmo, which means I affirm. Ayan. So, additional knowledge. Affirmo. And then, its quality naman, on the other hand, if the proposition denies class inclusion, whether complete or partial, then the quality is negative. Okay? Thus, both yung universal negative proposition and then we have the particular negative proposition are negative in quality. So, ang letter names naman na E and then O natin respectively, it came from the Latin word nego, which means I deny. Ayun. And below are the categorical propositions and the quality represented by each proposition. So, we have here all S are P. We have some S are P for I, no S are P, and then some S are not P. Okay, so each time now we are going to state a proposition, whether that is affirmation or a denial of the inclusion ng class, partially or wholly, nag-e-express tayo ng quality of a proposition. So, aside from the quality, ang meaning nun ay refers to whether the proposition affirms or denies the inclusion of a subject within the class of the predicate. Syempre, we also have it can also be expressed in quantity as well. So, it refers to the number of members of the subject term. Ibig sabihin, it refers to all the members of a certain class, whether universal or only to particular members of the class. Thus, yung both A and E natin of the standard form of categorical propositions are universal, while yung both I and O naman natin of the standard form propositions are both particular. Okay? And whenever na we begin our propositions with the terms all, no, or some, you are expressing the quantity of the proposition you assert. So, ito yung mga examples natin. So, for A, all integers are rational numbers. For I, we have some integers are rational numbers. For E, we have no integers are rational numbers. And then for O naman, we have the some integers are not rational numbers. Okay, so now we'll continue. So these are terms also which are important as we study mathematical logic. The first one is syllogism. So this refers to a deductive argument in which a conclusion is inferred from two premises. And then a categorical syllogism, it is an argument that is comprised of two premises and the conclusion, all its parts are categorical propositions. Itong categorical syllogism, it consists of three categorical propositions that contain exactly three terms, each of which occurs in exactly two of the constituent propositions. So, sabi nga, there are three important terms that we must learn and familiarize ourselves in order for us to understand how these are analyzed for validity and correctness. And according to Patrick Hurley, ito yung mga three terms na yon. The major term, it refers to the predicate term of the conclusion. The minor term, subject term of the conclusion. And then the middle term, it appears twice in the premise. Okay? Also, ang categorical syllogism, they have special names for the premises and then conclusions as well. We have the major premise, it contains the major term, and then yung minor premise naman, it contains the minor term. Okay, now let's proceed to the standard form of a categorical syllogism. For a categorical syllogism to be in standard form, the following should meet. Okay, so the first one is all three statements must follow the standard form of a categorical proposition, the A, E, I, and then the O. The two occurrences of each term, we have the major, the minor, the middle, are identical and are used in the same sense throughout the argument. Third, the major premise is listed first, then the minor premise, and the conclusion last. So this one, for the major premise, for the minor premise, and for our conclusion, so as you can see, we have for the middle term, yung mga predicate term natin, and then the subject term. So, here are our example. We have all even numbers are integers. We have all numbers in the form 2k are even numbers. Therefore, all numbers in the form 2k are integers. Also, remember na meron din tayong validity of categorical syllogism. The first one is the middle term must be distributed at least once. So, in this case, ang middle term natin is yung mga green. Okay? And then next, any term distributed in the conclusion must be distributed in the conclusion. It also must be distributed in the premise. Okay, so makikita naman natin na yung sa mga colors, for us to easily validate a categorical syllogism. And then at least one premise must be affirmative. So mayroon din naman tayong affirmation, at least one. And then a negative premise requires at least a negative conclusion and vice versa. And if both premises are universal, the conclusion must also be universal. So it is not possible na kapag non-universal ang ating premise, hindi pwede na ang ating conclusion ay universal. Or kapag naman ang ating kailangan both premises ay universal for our conclusion to be universal. Okay, tignan natin itong premise. All even numbers are integers and then all numbers in the form 2k are even numbers. So it satisfies yung validity of categorical syllogism. Okay, so as a continuation, we have here a distribution. So, itong distribution of terms in a categorical syllogism, this is important in proving validity and falsity. So, distribution, this is an attribute of a categorical proposition. It indicates whether the categorical proposition makes a statement about every member of the class represented by a given term. So, this is a technical term that is introduced para makarakterize natin yung ways in which yung mga terms natin, yung subject term, yung predicate term natin, can occur in a categorical proposition. So, in an A proposition, the subject is being distributed but the predicate is not. In an E proposition, the subject is being distributed in the proposition because the subject is said to be excluded from the class of the predicate. And then for the I proposition, no statement is made about all the members of the subjects as well as about all the members of the predicate. And then for the O proposition, no statement is made about all the members of the subject. So that is for the distribution. Yung proposition kasi, it distributes a term if it refers to all the members of the class designated by the term. Now, to evaluate the validity of a categorical syllogism, aside from the rules mentioned, some are listed below. And then these are the fallacies of syllogism. So it must contain exactly 3 terms. If there are more than 3 terms in a categorical syllogism, a fallacy is committed. So this is the fallacy of 4 terms. So exactly 3 terms. Remember that. For example, all girls are emotional, all boys are insensitive. Therefore, all girls are insensitive. Now, let's move to the next. The middle term must be distributed in at least one premise. So if this rule is violated, then the fallacy of the undistributed middle is committed. So the fallacy of the for this example, all frontliners are hardworking. All delivery riders are hardworking. Therefore, all delivery riders are frontliners. So, dito, the fallacy of undistributed middle is committed because yung middle term na hardworking is undistributed on both premises. Okay? Now, ito naman, any term distributed in the conclusion must also be distributed in the premises. And when a characteristics applies to all members of a class but just observed to some members of the same class, then it is called the fallacy of illicit process. So here is the example for that. All guards are males, no females are guards, therefore no females are males. So etong syllogism na ito, it commits the fallacy of illicit process because it contains illicit major. Yung males, they are distributed in the conclusion, yet undistributed in the major premise. Okay? Dun sa pinaka-major premise natin. And then, next, there should not be 2 negative premises. If this rule is violated, then a fallacy called the fallacy of exclusive premises is committed. So, here is an example for that. No apples or bananas. Some bananas are not fruit. So, therefore, some fruits are not apples. And we know na ang major and then ang minor premises natin in this case ay negative. That's why fallacy of exclusive premises is committed in this example. And then, here, we have if either the premise is negative, the conclusion must be negative. If this rule is violated, then a fallacy called fallacy of drawing an affirmative conclusion from a negative premise is committed. So, tignan natin ang example. No student assistants are lazy. Some students are student assistant. Therefore, some students are lazy. So, nakikita na itong syllogism na ito, this is invalid kasi yung major premise natin ay negative na agad. Yet, the conclusion is positive. So, ang tawag pala doon ay fallacy of drawing an affirmative conclusion from a negative premise. And we have here, from the two universal premises, no conclusion may be drawn. If this rule is violated, then the fallacy called existential fallacy is committed. So, tignan nyo tong example na ito. All drivers are holders of driver's license. Next, all Filipinos are drivers. Therefore, some Filipinos are holders of driver's license. So, this is called the existential fallacy. And we're done. Ang bilis, no? Ngayon, try nating sagutan itong mga questions na prepare ko para sa inyo. Okay? Pwede kayong kumuha ng papel at makisagot sa akin. Okay? So, tignan natin. Unang tanong, it refers to an argument that satisfies the validity condition. That is, the conclusion Q is true whenever the premises are all true. Ano kayang sagot? Okay, very good. So, ang sagot dyan sa pauna ay valid. Valid argument. Okay? Mahusay. Pangalawa, what do you call the previous statement or proposition from which another is inferred? Very good. Ang tawag doon ay premise. Mathusay. Okay, pangatlo, it refers to the final proposition in an argument. Tama, conclusion or consequent. Pang-apat, what is the difference between tautology and contradiction? Okay, so ang kinaibahan ng tautology sa contradiction, sa tautology, it is a propositional form where every truth assignment, it satisfies yung P natin. Ibig sabihin, lahat ng entries natin ay true, whereas for our contradiction, this is a propositional form where every truth assignment is false. Mathusay talaga ang mga bata. Sumunod, it is arguments that are used as building blocks to construct more complicated, valid arguments. Okay, tama. Ang tawag dyan ay Rule of Inference. Okay, sumunod. It is a proposition that combines two categories and asserts or denies that all or some of the elements of one category are part of the category. So, dito may clue na kayo eh. Categories, ayan. Tama. Ang tamang sagot dyan ay Categorical Syllogism. At ang panghuling tanong, it refers to a deductive argument in which a conclusion is inferred from two premises. Tama. Ang sagot dyan ay syllogism. Mahusay. Mathusay talaga ang mga batang mandunongs. Ayan. So, talagang mukhang marami kayong natutunan ngayong araw na ito sa ating lesson. Nawa ay ito ay makatulong para mas nakikita pa natin ang kahalagahan ng pag-aaral ng logic, kung bakit nga ba ito kasama sa General Mathematics. Sana ay nag-enjoy kayo sa araw na ito. At bago ako lumisan, nais kong iwan ang isang quotation mula kay Albert Einstein. Yan. So, sabi niya, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. Kasi nga itong logic, di ba, nasubukan tayo from week 7 to 9 na mag-isip talaga. Di ba? So, maraming salamat and God bless you.